Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about the Apple iPhone 12 Pro. And when I first saw it announced, the marketing materials and the commercials from Apple, they were really pushing this as a professional device for creating content. They had film directors making film shorts with it and professional photographers doing professional photography with it. So it really piqued my interest and I wanted to compare it to how it stacks up with my equipment. So we're going to first do photography and then video. On the photography side, I'm going to compare it to my FujiFilm GFX50s medium format camera. It's 50 megapixels. And then on the video side, I'm going to compare it to my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. So first, let's start with photography. First, there's kind of one major problem with the iPhone, or all iPhones actually, when it comes to the camera, and that is the aperture is fixed. You cannot change the aperture, and that's a pretty big deal when it comes to professional photography, whether you're trying to change your depth of field or your exposure, like the exposure triangle. It's just a problem. I kind of got away with it in this example because the shot was head on, so it's not as noticeable. But if you're shooting something like at an angle, it's going to be a big problem, or like real estate photography, big problem, just lots of problems. So I wanted to give the iPhone the biggest advantage possible. And usually, when you shoot professional work and you want the most like dynamic range, the best quality, you want to shoot in RAW. Now, the native camera app does not shoot in RAW. Now, Apple announced Pro RAW coming out, and it really cannot come out soon enough, and you'll see why. So I used a third-party app called Halide. Now, Halide is an excellent third-party phone camera app. I highly recommend it, and it exports to RAW. The problem is, once you export to RAW, the image comes out for some reason about 1 to 2 stops overexposed. I don't know why. JPEGs look perfect, but when you export to RAW, it just does not come out right. And I looked at it on the iPhone, in the Photos app, on my iPad, on my Mac Pro, in the Photos app, in Lightroom, in Photoshop, everywhere, it comes out overexposed. So you can't judge your exposure at all. But I still wanted to try to give it every chance possible. And so I took about 5 shots. I had to kind of guess where my exposure is. And then I merged that. And so looking at the raw completed file, and it looks pretty good overall. Once you zoom in, I can see a little bit of artifacting still, and that's probably because the sensor is just so small. But it's not bad. Now, when you compare it to the JPEGs, in the native app, the exposure is more of what I was aiming towards. So the exposure looks right, but when you zoom in, there's a little bit more of artifacting and noise. So there's, kind of a give and take. Noise is always going to be a problem with this camera because the sensor is just so small, and it's just physics. And there's really, you can't really get around it. Also, 12 megapixels is just not very much for professional work in terms of print. Now, if it's just online stuff, you might be okay. But if you're, printing stuff, like even an 8x10 would be challenging, because usually you want to like print at like 150 dpi to 300 dpi, and I don't think the iPhone can even hit that. I think maybe 100 dpi. So you're going to lose some quality there as well when printing. Here is what the GFX looks like. You zoom in, there's more detail, there's no artifacting, it's just a cleaner image, and that's kind of what you expect from a medium format camera. That's kind of what you can expect. Now on the video side, again, I wanted to give the iPhone as much advantage as possible. So when you're shooting video, usually you want to shoot in log, because that gives you, the most flexibility and dynamic range in your video. And again, the native app does not shoot in log. So I used a third-party app called Filmic. It's an excellent app. It gives you way more control over your video. Highly recommend it. Now, filming in Filmic, I did this sample scene, and here's what it looks like. I didn't grade it, so I left it untouched, so there's not a lot of contrast. But overall, you can see there's some noise in the corners. Now I can tell you now, it's better here than it is in like the natural standard setting. So here's the log, okay, and then let's go to the natural setting in Filmic. Now it's got the contrast, but you can see there's just way more noise, and so the log does definitely give you an advantage. And then here's the native app, and the native app, it's also still noisier than the log. So your best option is just to use Filmic in log and then grade it, and you're good to go. Now obviously this thing shoots HDR Dolby Vision video, and that's kind of a complicated situation right now, because if you shoot HDR video and you send it to someone who doesn't have an HDR monitor, it's going to look weird. Your colors are going to be washed out, the exposure is most likely going to be overexposed, it's just going to be a problem. So you have to consider if you want to shoot HDR, depending on who you're sending it to, or SDR. And there's a setting in the preferences where you can turn off HDR video and it'll shoot SDR. So if you're going to send it to a lot of people or go on, or send post it online, you might want to stay in SDR mode. So here is what the HDR video looks like, on an HDR screen, and it doesn't look nearly as good as what it looks like on the actual phone screen. It just looks a little washed out. Now, I did film this episode in SDR, and so I'm going to switch to that now. So this is the iPhone in SDR, and I can tell you it looks much better than when recording in HDR, looking at it on an SDR monitor. So SDR, I think, is still the way to go when you're putting professional content and you're uploading it online or sending it to a lot of people. So that's something you really have to consider. When everybody has HDR monitors and can support things like Dolby Vision, then of course leave it in HDR, but it really depends on where you're sending it to. If you're just going to keep it on your phone and watch it on your phone, then keep it on keep it in HDR. Now if you send it to some people and the device can detect that you're sending it to an SDR device, it will convert it to SDR, but I found that conversion is not that great. You're better off recording in SDR from the beginning. The conversion is just a little weird. It just does not look as good than starting out in SDR. So, but no matter what you shoot, noise is always going to be a problem. The sensor is just so small, and I think for them to, output a 4K image on a 27-inch monitor, they're like 5 to 10 years away. So, I hope this helps you, know what to expect when, purchasing an iPhone 12 and with, producing professional content in mind. It's not cheap. For, the thing is like $1,200 with tax. For $1,200, like on the video side, you could get like a Panasonic GH5 with a lens, and that thing's outputs amazing material. On the photography side, you could use like a Canon 5D Mark II, and it's still going to give you, a better image. That's 24 megapixels. It's RAW. The exposure is going to be right. You can adjust your aperture. You're going to be in a much better situation when it comes to creating professional material for clients. So those are things that just you really have to consider. There's a lot of caveats here. And I hope this helps you know what to expect and helps you make a better decision. All right, see you next time, guys.